Hacksaw Ridge is a film that is directed by Mel Gibson, which we'll get to in a second, but the film covers the story of a man named Desmond Doss, who was a conscientious objector during World War II. He was actually the first conscientious objector to win the Congressional Medal of Honor. He was a Christian man who was very, very dedicated to living up to the laws of Christianity. So he went into the battle without a weapon, and his sole purpose was to simply save lives. So Desmond Doss was an incredibly a brave man who went into battle without a weapon, and it was definitely a story that needed to be told, and that Mel Gibson told, so beautifully. And the film does an amazing job of doing this. So here's just a couple other photos. This is just a little view of some of our characters that we have. So we have Desmond Doss in the top left-hand corner. We have Vince Vaughn as sort of the general of this battalion that is sent into Hacksaw Ridge, because pretty much what they do is they send in multiple different battalions, and after one is wiped out, they send in another. So they're sort of just they keep on going in until they continue to push through the lines and everything. Then we also have Hugo Weaving, I believe that's his name. He's been in tons and tons of stuff, and he plays the father of Desmond Doss, who fought in World War I. Finally, we have Dorothy and Desmond, who are meeting for the first time here, and they end up getting married, and they live out their lives together, and it's a very, very beautiful relationship, and the music does a fantastic job of helping out that relationship. Finally, so we have Mel Gibson. Mel Gibson is an unbelievable, talented, brilliant director who's also directed Braveheart, The Passion of the Christ, Apocalypto, and now Hacksaw Ridge. I'm pretty sure he's planning on doing some other stuff, but he does unbelievably with the historical stuff. Braveheart was a legendary film that'll always be remembered. Whether you're religious or not, The Passion of the Christ was a brilliantly done film. And then we also have Apocalypto, which was a very, very interesting film, yet a very, very powerful, intense film. And Hacksaw Ridge was very similar to that, but told a unbelievably brilliant story that needed to be told. And then Rupert Gregson-Williams is our composer on this project. So he's composed for stuff like The Legend of Tarzan, Hotel Rwanda, The Crown, etc. I believe actually Mel Gibson heard his score for Legend of Tarzan, and that's what made him actually hire him for Hacksaw Ridge, because he heard his score for Legend of Tarzan, which is an unbelievable score. I did a reconstruction of that a while back, featuring Colleen McMahon. And then if we come back here, so as you guys can tell, I sort of went through the score, sort of like I like to do. Like with Gladiator, we started out all the way at the beginning, and we just sort of went through the score, and we covered, like, I think on that one, like 8 or so tracks, and we broke all those down. And today I'm going to do the Okinawa Battlefield, which is the first track. It introduces the main theme, which is played with like a bassoon and cello. And then we also have Pretty Corny. We have Climbing for a Kiss. Also like the Desmond and Dorothy theme, which is very, very beautiful. Then we have historical footage, and we have A Miraculous Return. So the whole goal of when we do these behind the scores is essentially to understand how the scores are constructed, and to try to not only match the musicality of the score, but also to try to best recreate the production of the score. So a lot of the times when the composers are actually composing the scores, they're not going to be trying to reach the top of the line production. They're not going to be recording everything using polyphonic voices and 4-part counterpoint and everything. They're going to be using a whole lot of ensemble patches, etc. But what we're theoretically trying to do is we're trying to literally recreate it like it sounds on the soundtrack, and that's what I tried to go for. And probably the best thing for that is to include a recording of John Cage's 433. Now, I haven't seen anybody do this before when it comes to like putting this specific track on there, but it is absolutely awesome if you're wanting to achieve that level of realism, because if you listen to this score, everything's very closely mic'd. It all sounds very, very beautiful and intimate, and when you put this thing under the recording, it sounds amazing. Actually, if you guys can tell, when we first introduced the theme in Okinawa Battlefield, I actually introduced the ambient sounds with it, because it sounds like something is actually being recorded. So if I just go ahead and mute this and the bassoons, it sounds sort of like this. So you get like the actual sound of an orchestra recording in a hall, which is very, very cool. So let's just go ahead and start out with the beginning. So we start out on this big, big drone on E. And it's sort of this very, very big ambient drone. There's multiple different layers that build. We also have this non-resin string, which is pretty much from Albion 5 Tundra. It has this very sort of this very dead feeling to it. And this is actually the track that they play at the beginning of the film, as well. Like when all the people, when it shows the Battle of Okinawa, it sort of fast forward and shows you the events of what happened, and people are on fire, and people are, there's body limbs everywhere. It's absolutely horrifying. But there's this beautiful, beautiful theme played with the bassoons and the cello, which is pretty cool. But I also used a viola instead of a cello, and I believe I used like soltasto. Actually, no, I don't believe I did that. I actually believe I just used arco, and then we went ahead and added a lot of reverb, and you sort of get that really down and dirty, gritty sound. But yeah. So we have this low pad here, and then we introduced, after about 25 seconds, the first round of the theme, which comes in on the bassoons and the violas in our case. Here's just some of our pads. Then we have a boom, like a sub hit. Right, so we have this going on for quite some time, and then we come in with this very, very beautiful progression. Let's move this over here. We have E minor. We go to C major. B minor. Right, so it's this very, very beautiful progression, and we have the choirs, which also adds another dimension to that. So if I could just go ahead and build this section just by soloing stuff. And so we start out with this big string ensemble. And we have the... We actually have the O's and the ums. The ums add like this very sort of warm tone to it. The O's have this very dramatic feel to it. So I wanted both of them in there, and it actually sounds pretty good with having them both in there. We have our horns. We have like a solo French horn with like a very sort of warm tone, warm round tone. Then we also have the string ensemble, which is again written polyphonically, so several voices. And we have our cellos playing that main line. And so as you can see, we actually have violin 2 divisi. So we actually have two violin 2s. And then we have 2 cellos, so cello divisi. And so then we just have 1 violin 1, which is playing the main melody most of the times. And we're just using violin 2s to sort of help carry it. And as you guys will see, when we get into the more interesting contrapuntal parts where there's a little bit more going on, especially in this section where it gets into the second part of Okinawa Battlefield, when it actually fast forward, or actually it goes backwards to when Desmond is like a young kid, and it's this overhead flyover shot of the forest and everything. It's very beautiful. It introduces this main theme, which actually comes in on a guitar, so like this. And then it goes, of course, to or the right, so it gets a little bit more fun and a little bit more jolly there. But this guitar part is so beautiful because, especially on this A minor, it's this very, very beautiful progression, and as you guys can tell, there's a whole lot to be done with the string section. So I actually have violin 1 playing the main melody. I have the 2 violin 2s actually playing the counter melody. And I sort of went over this in my string writing video that I recorded the other day using this exact same passage. But yeah, so we have the violin 2s doing the counter melody. Then we have the violas and the cellos doing pretty much our filling in our harmony, essentially. So if I go here and I just sort of play this section, I'm just going to start adding stuff. And then here's where we add in our children's choir. So we have a children's choir sus, and we also have the legato. The legato has, of course, much more smooth transitions, and it sounds much more like a sort of group of 4 singers, which are singing very fluidly, and you can hear all the transitions in the legato. Of course, the sus is just providing that harmonic background. So we have this very beautiful tone. And especially when you add in like the male choir or the choir, you start to get this very Eric Whitacre sound. Go ahead and pay him. With all the suspensions, but yeah, the choirs are really, really nice. And Harry and Rupert actually write excellently for choirs because they both went to a boys' choir school when they were young. So you can just sort of hear it in their music. You hear a lot of really, really great choirs in the score, and they're sort of in the background. They're not too up front. The main upfront instruments, of course, you have like the guitar, you have like the bassoon, the solo bassoon, which has a very, very warm, excellent sort of warlike tone to it, very similar to the range of the French horn. Which is I also use in this recreation quite a lot. The solo French horn, not too strong, but more of just like the sort of rounder, lower timbre in terms of like the if you were to have like the velocity and logic, you'd have it sort of like all the way down here, and you sort of get that very, very beautiful round tone. Versus if you have it all the way up, and you get that very aggressive like Zimmer-like tone. But yeah, right. And then we also have some Metropolis Arc stuff going on. So we have 2 low strings actually from Metropolis Arc. We have it from Metropolis Arc 2, and then we also have it from Metropolis Arc 1. Metropolis Arc 2 has a much more warm feel. Metropolis Arc 1 has a much more grittier feel, but when they're both combined together, it provides a good undercurrent for this string section here. But then, of course, we also have some other string sections. We have the Metropolis Arc full ensemble section. We also have the Majestica section. And then, of course, we have our Woodwind ensemble here, which are don't really play stuff until this section, and it's usually because they're playing soloistically. Like the clarinet and the oboe, there's actually no woodwind ensembles inside of this piece. And then we also have our choir section, which is mainly just built out of those 2 articulations, the O and the and I love the because it has a very warm, rich tone, and you don't always feel as though you're listening to a choir, but it has this very complementary tone working with the rest of the orchestra, so it's very, very helpful when it comes to that. But anyways, so let's move on to here. So we go through that little section, and of course we go C, D major, E minor to sort of build, and then we head into the brighter, warmer section. And that's with our violin 1, by the way, introducing our melody. So you can see when we introduce violin 1, it goes da da da, and then we of course have our counter melody come in and complement that. Right? And then we add in our viola, and it's adding yet another harmonic voice to it to add a little bit more power. And then we add in another layer. You know, honestly, if it were me, there's a little transition right here where I feel as though it could be smoothed out a little bit, but since we have this sort of concert hall feeling to it, it feels a lot more smooth if we just sort of have those sort of inconsistencies and those sort of that sort of natural feeling, because we don't want to make it too perfect or else we begin to feel like it's sampling. That's why we want to create like a very realistic feel to this. And then when we add in our bass section, which actually we don't include the Metropolis Arc 1, we just have 2. So of course it goes to C major, right? So we have this, and then D major, and that's actually like a minor 7th. And he's so good with sus chords in this score, like even the main theme where we get to in a second with the piano. It's this. And Henry Jackman did it well too on the Birth of a Nation score, which is very, very beautiful too. If I just go ahead and grab a string ensemble patch here, it's like this. And they're very, very helpful because suspensions just sound so beautiful, and especially in this context, it sounds great. So then we get into our next section. We have this sort of guitar lick going on that's sort of like an ostinato. There we go. So that E major, or that E minor to A major is this very, very joyous feel. Sort of like that. But anyway, so we have that guitar line, and then we also have these sort of beautiful high icy strings going on. And the level of beauty and detail in these Albion 5 strings is just insane. Very, very right. This is indeed Dorian, because we have this natural 6th, right? Or if we were in G major, you know, that would be Lydian. But anyways, mode talk, nerd talk. Okay. Okay, so we have this guitar line come in. We have this solo cello thing, sort of, and then our complementary guitars come in. So we have 2 other guitars, and then we also have a mandolin. Then we sort of have this G major thing going on the strings, which sounds a little bit like this. Then we come back in with the guitars. So you can see we sort of had in the violins the da 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 dun 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 dun, to where we also had in the woodwind section as well with the solo clarinet. The solo clarinet has this very, very beautiful warm tone. If you listen to a lot of like Mozart's clarinet concertos are among his beautiful works, because the clarinet just has this beautiful warm tone. And it actually, in my symphony, which I just completed, this 30-minute long classical symphony, in the 4th movement, there's a lot of clarinet solos and stuff, because it has such a warm, beautiful, round tone that works very, very well in the context of an orchestra, especially when you have a very sort of low dynamic string section. It works very, very well. But anyways, there's that again. So our piano part here is our pretty much main theme. Plays this pretty much when he first meets Dorothy. It plays it when he's on the stretcher and he's about to come home, because that makes sense, because when they saw each other, she was like, come home to me, and then he's coming home, so they're playing the theme. Very, very good use of thematic material. We have the... We're actually in A minor. Okay, so it's like this. Right? And then it goes... Right? And under that, we just have this hanging string line here, which is, again, Albion 5. And I see some people talking about like how you can tell which library it generally is. The whole goal, I think, is to not have the person even wonder in the first place what library it is, because you want it, especially something like this, I want it to sound like a completely recorded orchestra. And I think that if you include very isolated parts of like library, for example, if I just include one string library in a section, it becomes a little distracting, because you can just tell it's separate libraries and they're all together and stuff. You want to really round it to create one finished product. So I try to blend the libraries very well and use multiple different libraries in my workflow. So I have Cinematic Studio Strings, Metropolis Arc 1, Metropolis Arc 2. I have Albion. I use a lot of the Albions. I use the flautandos from Albion 2 and the consortinos from Albion 2. I use some of the staccatos and spiccatos from Albion 3, which are great. We have some of the Friedlander stuff. We have Omnisphere for all of the guitars. For the viola, again, we have the Friedlander stuff. Actually, I believe it's called like the Fischer viola, which is pretty great. And then we have Majestica. We have some gravity pads. We have some solo bassoons, which I believe are from... Okay, so this is actually the Audict stuff, which is it's pretty great if you just hear the level of detail. So those are pretty great. And then for the clarinets and the oboes and the flute, I believe we have orchestral tools. Let's see. Yep, we're rocking the solo. Oh, no, we're still Audict. I feel like the clarinets are orchestral tools. Okay, it is. Yeah. And then our oboe is as well. Alrighty. Let's see. Already did that part, and now we are on to the Desmond and Dorothy theme. So yeah, we have the violin 1 and the violin 2, one of the Divisi parts, come in with this da 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 da. So we sort of go from the piano to full orchestration, and it ends up sounding very, very nice and lush. And like I said, we're using most of our strings here to sort of complement each other, and sort of spreading it out across the range of the orchestra so we get this full, rich sound to it. Okay. Okay, so now we're getting into historical footage. So this is actually the last track on the soundtrack. Not the last track in the suite, but it's the last track on the soundtrack. And it has some pretty beautiful harmony in it. We have this... And if you're a composer and you don't already use that, you definitely should. So you have this. All right, wait. So you have this. Right, so it's this sus2. And it's very, very, very beautiful, beautiful sound. So, like, for example, if you wanted to use that. Yeah, but I digress. But yeah, those suspensions can really, really be helpful. And Rupert uses a whole lot of those in this score, especially the sus4s, which sound very, very nice. So the piano is indeed Metropolis Arc 2. I mean, just listen to the warm tone of this thing. Playing some Beethoven sonatas for you, but anyways, it's a very beautiful sound. It has this like very warm, rich tone, but it's also it has this very descriptive sound. You can hear the recording. Or etc. And also, you can hear it feels very up close in the mix. You know? But anyways, I love using that piano. Okay, I'm digressing here. But especially if you turn on... Alright, I'm gonna digress more, I don't even care. If you turn on... For example, this. Well, let's just do it. Hey. But yeah, I'm getting so off topic. So we have this D minor, which is there for quite some time, and we introduce this. We introduce this F, G major, and then we turn this key into G minor. And then we're into our next piece. If we just go ahead and listen to that little section there really quick. So as you guys can hear, we have this D major, right? Again, that's sus too. Right? But yeah, and then we go into this. Clarinet solo. Children's choir as well here. You can hear like the O's in the higher section of the orchestra, but it's very sort of fluid and soft. It isn't too much in your face, more complimentary. And then we go into our last section here, which is this very, very emotional section of the movie. Let's just go ahead and play it here. So I see someone talking about the drums. Okay, so the drums are Hans Zimmer percussion, and they are the Junkie XL mixes, pretty closely mixed actually. When you introduce the taikos. And then, of course, we bring back this main theme towards the end here. This, there's a big build, right? So we start out here with this main theme, which is played with the bassoons, which is a very interesting instrumental choice, like a choice to have as one of the main voices in the score, but it works extremely well, especially when you have all these really, really cool intervals that he uses. Like he has this It uses that minor second interval, which sounds great. Especially when you have that low bass down there. And then you play the A major on top of that. So instead of going down, you're going up with the... Then you of course have your... So the most important part of this in general is to understand what can we sort of take away from this. First of all, you can take away the fact that woodwinds are completely usable in a modern score. They're very, very helpful. They add a whole other dimension to a score. In this score, or this behind the score recreation, I paid a lot of attention to giving tribute to his use of woodwinds in the score. So we have the solo flute, the solo clarinet, the solo oboe, and we of course have the bassoons, which are playing the main theme. So definitely do not hesitate to use woodwinds in your writing. When I do all these behind the scores, it helps me every single time. I understand tons more things once I'm done creating them because I understand how that composer approached what he did, and so you can understand the niches of many different composers and what they tend to do, which can sort of build up your knowledge and really help you out in terms of that. Also, guitars are very usable in scores, and they actually can be pretty great. So we have a few different like sort of steel guitars. We have a mandolin. We have an electric guitar towards the end here. So those are very usable. So you could use those as well. Also, sus chords are pretty great, especially in the main theme. Works very, very well. Just again to recapitulate that. Right. But anyway, so we have that, and then we also try to think here. Oh yes, also pay attention to melody and counter melody. If we were to remove the actual counter melody from this one section here, it would sound a little bit less eccentric. Right? But if we actually add in those counter melodies. And this section was a bit difficult to get right because there's voices moving in all different directions. There's voices moving up and voices moving down and voices landing on different notes to create this inversion of this chord. And this whole entire thing was done by ear. Every single behind the score that I've done up to now has been all by ear, other than like a small section of Gladiator, which was that battle sequence, and there was like some really weird stuff happening there, so I needed a score to reference. But everything else is completely by ear, and usually I only have to listen to it right around tops 5 times, and it's a very, very good ear exercise as well. But this section was a bit hard to get right, so pay attention to in your scores. If you have this very bland section, it's very boring and everything, add in some counter melodies, add in some movement, whether it's with the violins, whether you have like a solo clarinet or something like that, just a voice moving and adding a bit of dimension to what you're doing, which is very, very helpful. And then let's see what we have here. I think another really, really cool thing is going all the way from really, really low dynamic levels all the way to up high. So we start out here, for example, with this very small guitar, incredibly minimalist. Then we add in some more guitars. And then we add in strings, and we continue to build and build and build and build. And so it's very, very important to also use instrumentation as a dynamic tool, not only to rely on dynamic markings, but also to rely on how you're using instrumentation to create balance. That's something that a lot of classical composers deal with as well. And when I was writing my symphony, since everything is done full score like this, you sort of have to pay attention to dynamics and balancing because it's just all in the paper there, and you sort of have to balance it without having sample libraries there. And this is supposed to be played by an actual orchestra. And once it comes back from London, I'm going to commission this thing and get it played. But anyways, so it has you really have to pay that close attention to detail. It's very, very important that you do that. Okay. But yeah, and that's another important lesson to learn from this thing as well. We have the main theme. I mean, the most important thing to really keep in mind about this score, and something that we've seen a lot in the behind the score thing, is just the right times to use themes. For example, like when Dorothy in the film says, promise me you'll come home or whatever, when he's coming home at the end, they play the theme. Okinawa Battlefield, he sets the stage for that theme all the way at the beginning of the film, and when certain things happen, he uses that theme to really add a whole nother dimension, and he builds themes, and the viewer is unintentionally taking all of that in and really adapting these themes, like really putting these themes with different events and characters and situations and everything like that, and it helps to overall create a much more multi-dimensional cinematic experience.